Here's a photo of the anti-suicide nuts.
So you just showed one terrible story from a country with billions of people and asked me if we should shut down trade with a whole country based on one anecdotal story from 2010 about one company in horrific conditions.
From this story, should we have shut down trade with China over, at this time, this specific incident occurring?
A whole country?
Yes.
Over one company?
It's a simple yes or no question.
No, we shouldn't.
Oh, Brad is evil and accepts human sacrifice.
Tim Pool flipped out and called me evil just because I disagreed with him.
You are saying you accept a certain degree of mass
I like how everything is a crash out these days.
suicide so that your graph go up.
That is not what I'm saying.
So you think we should
maybe we
trade
should sanction trade with Foxconn. Maybe we should restrict trade in that industry. Maybe that specific region of China you suspend. It's horrible. It's evil. China's evil. I don't know what you're trying to make me say about.
We should not do trade
with anything with China. Okay, you explain that to Americans when every single thing they rely on and buy gets more expensive after years of inflation under Biden.
I will.
You come in. MAGA comes in and says, "All right, you know what? You guys elected us."
Also, keep in mind, unless somebody has a link to how this is possible otherwise, I'm pretty sure targeted tariffs on countries do not work because they will always just come through another country. You have no way to validate that supply chain in a way that you can enforce that tariff in any reasonable way. That's why you have to tariff the entire sector, well, unless you're trying to sanction somebody. We're not necessarily trying to tariff. They're trying to just target and fuck over one country. Although I don't even know if the country would be fucked over. They're still distributing it through other countries. Because you just end up paying more for it.
Inflation under Biden.
I will.
You come in. MAGA comes in.
Oh, also, wait. I haven't finished this video yet. Tim might do it here, but I just want to get ahead just in case. And if he doesn't, it will be coming, and it is true. Eventually, conservatives will be saying that paying more for things is good. It's actually okay. It's good to be paying more for. It's good to be paying more for goods and services, even though they said the tariffs wouldn't make stuff more expensive, even though they said it'd be good for the economy. They're going to say, actually, it is going to cost more, but that's okay. That's a good thing that it's costing more.
It says, all right, you know what? You guys elected us because everything's so unaffordable.
I will stand on top of a mountain. I will stand on top of a mountain and say, and directly into the eyes, I will do it right now. To every voter, I will look into the eyes of every voter right now and say, Brad is evil and accepts human sacrifice so that you can have a cheap iPhone. And if you're willing to buy a cheap iPhone, knowing that people are committing mass suicide, you stand along with them.
So I'm
and I will
evil
stand on the
because
other
I
side.
disagree with you about trade policy?
Because you think there's an acceptable degree of mass suicide in concentration camps so that your economy can improve.
I don't think that. You're shadow boxing with a caricature.
The Uyghur stuff was already happening in Trump term 1, no? When did the Uyghur stuff start? There's a bit longer of the Brad Tim convo. Oh my God.
I will look into the eyes of every voter right now and say, Brad is evil.
I'll be honest, I think Tim Pool has some anger issues. Take a listen to this clip where I try to explain why I think tariffs do more.
I talked to Brad before. I don't remember on whose show it was, but he seemed like a real-life human being. Very few people in this industry are like real-life human beings, but he seems like a real-life human being that has real-life conversations, whereas Tim is like an actor.
More harm than good, and Tim literally just says he doesn't care about facts or data. Take a listen.
You cannot put the genie back in the bottle when it comes to trade. Steel is a great example. President Trump tried to in his first term. He put tariffs on steel imports from our allies and from other countries in order to try to increase domestic steel production, and it worked a little bit, right? You had a little bit of an increase in U.S. steel production, but and research on this is overwhelming, actual employment in U.S. manufacturing overall suffered. Multiple times more jobs were destroyed than created because the cost went up in all the other industries that have steel as an input cost. So other manufacturing industries lost jobs, so steel could be protected a little bit. More people lost jobs and lost income.
So Brad is running into an issue here because he's trying to debate econ, but the other guy is just a populist rhetorician, basically. So Tim is never responding with substance to any of these points. It's just going to be, okay, well, how can I maneuver this into tariff good? And that's it. Tariff good. The tariff is good because Trump wants it, so we have to defend the tariff. Oh, I guess that's probably why he starts sewing the out and screaming.
In all the industries that rely on steel as an input cost. It's a huge negative to American society that protected some people who are well-connected.
And so what you're describing is what I call the heroin addiction economy, where it's let's continually gut and destroy the root of labor in this country for short-term gains in other areas. I don't care.
Short-term gains? Is that how you would describe the United States, as all short-term gains? What do you mean?
If a top-level company is going to decrease a little bit, if it's going to restore the base and foundation of jobs in this country. So
you don't care about policies that destroy hundreds of thousands of jobs.
I don't care about the fruits of the poisonous tree. And saying now that...
Well, I do.
The fruits of the poisonous tree? What the fuck are you talking about?
great. And that will lead to destruction of this country.
I mean, the hyperbole at the end there is just quite something. Opposing steel tariffs will lead to the destruction of this country. I don't think so, Tim. I actually think we'll be okay either way. Now, my point here, just to explain if you couldn't get it from the brief clip, because I, again, wasn't allowed very much time to speak, is that Trump tried tariffs when he was president, and he put tariffs on steel imports coming into the country in hopes of protecting steel jobs in the steel industry here in the US. And it did do that to some extent. About 1,000 jobs in the steel industry increased after those tariffs. But as many as 75,000 other jobs were lost in other manufacturing sectors where they rely on steel as an input and their costs went up. So you protected some jobs, but overall more jobs were lost. That was my...
How does Trump misinform the public on foreign entities paying for a tariff? I'm 25 and people have gone their whole lives without knowing what the difference between import tax and tariffs. Yeah, well, most people never deal with that as an American. But the important thing to remember is, and you have to remember this, and it's already coming if it hasn't already, MAGA doesn't care. MAGA, it's kind of part of the, I don't want to associate this with the neo-Nazi talking point, because it's really not, but it's the economics talking point. A lot of these people are getting suckered into, they don't care about economics, because the economics of the United States are pretty good. They never cared about the economics. They care about the intangibles, the culture, and they're willing to take economic hits to have what they consider to be a better culture. Now, Trump will talk about economics, but it's just like that's like a virtue signal for think tanks or something. The important thing is the culture. So if it ever comes down to a point to where we can fuck our economy over a little bit to have big culture gains, MAGA will always be in favor of that. MAGA will be in favor of that. Not just Trump, but MAGA will follow Trump there. So just remember that, because it could be coming, or maybe it's already coming, but yeah.
My point that these things do more harm than good, and there's lots of data and facts and research to back that idea up. Now, you could disagree.
Am I missing something? Isn't the argument about tariffs is that we want to protect domestic industry by making our industry more competitively priced relative to foreign competitive? No. What are you talking about? No. What do you mean? We are competitive. We have the largest GDP in the world. We've got a big GDP per capita. We're the foundation of a ton of innovation, from pharmaceuticals to tech to software to fucking spaceships. Like, no, what do you mean? What are you talking about? What do you think America's missing? Like, only Trumples have gotten like hoodwinked into thinking that, like, but do we have enough coal miners? We don't need coal miners. We're ahead of that. We're advanced beyond that level of economy. We don't need people going into mines to extract coal with pickaxes. And the fact that we're somehow sad that we don't have those jobs, it doesn't make any sense. Our economy is almost at full employment. We don't have a ton of people who are lacking jobs. Economically, compared to the G7, we're doing great, but I'll just say we're doing okay because that triggers some people to say that. You're not when you protect your basic industries, like your raw extraction or refining, you're doing that at the cost of every customer in the United States who now has to pay more for everything, and at the cost of your greater industries that are working further on down the supply chain. You don't want people mining lithium out of the ground. You want people being computer programmers. You don't want people who are, digging for oil or natural gas. You want people creating rocket ships. That's what we do in our economy. We're highly specialized, and we create these like final stage goods and services that are really amazing that only the United States can create because we have the specialized knowledge to do so. We don't need to do the raw level, base level stuff. That's a waste of our time.
Agree. You could cite other studies, you could push back, but he didn't do that. He just says, I don't care. I don't care about the data. I don't care. I just want to protect workers. But I'm literally explaining to you how you're not doing that. It felt like I was talking to a woke person. He ranted on and on about personal anecdotes and experiences and hypotheticals. And whenever I tried to cite statistics or facts or research, he dismissed it as graph goes up. Take a listen to this clip where he does exactly that.
We're getting too much trapped into the graph go up argument, which is the stupidest argument imaginable. It is good that on average people can buy more sticks of bubblegum and there's no more baseball at the park. There's no more apple pie. There's no more Christmas. That's insane.
That's such a caricature of economic progress.
But the GDP
people who
much trapped into the graph
research, he dismissed it as graph goes up. Take a listen to this clip where he does exactly that.
We're getting too much trapped into the graph go up argument, which is the stupidest argument imaginable.
Oh, graph go up. So he doesn't care about the economy, and he'll virtue signal on this more and more and more going forward. And I'm sure he will more even in this conversation, but
it is good that on average people can buy more sticks of bubblegum and there's no more baseball at the park. There's no more apple pie. There's no more Christmas. That's insane.
That's such a caricature.
Apple pie, Christmas, in baseball games, right? And so we can buy more bubblegum, right? This is the economic for culture. So he's willing to make these big economic sacrifices for culture. Now, there is an argument I guess you can have there. Well, I mean, there's always an argument. There's an argument you can have for anything. However, remember, these were the people who said they wanted to run on like kitchen table issues and on the economy and on like building a stronger economic foundation. But this is not an economic argument. This is a culture argument. Ironically enough, I guess Brad kind of said it like what the progressives used to argue for culture over economy. The economy, we need to focus on DEI, affirmative action, culture shit, I guess.
of economic progress.
But the
to the people who sorry, for 1 second, to the people who have struggled to afford everything over the last couple of years, and for people on your side of the political spectrum have railed against that and how unaffordable life has been, you are now coming on and championing policies that would make things go up and then dismissing the cost of living going up as
what are the cultural gains they're trying to make? They'll never specify. They will never specify that. The reality is people feel kind of like lost and aimless. Probably, I've said this a million times, but it's not sexy to talk about somebody gives a fuck. Probably because of technology and technological proliferation, meaning like the fact that you're connected to the internet all the time, you've got a phone, it makes you fucking miserable because everything you read is horrible and evil and terrible. And instead of going outside and evaluating how you feel like the world is based on what you see, you're evaluating the world based on what your phone tells you to think about the world, which is horrible because that's where all the money is to be made, that's where all the algorithms are directing you, that's where all these people are manipulating your mind to be. So of course you feel horrible. So if somebody says they can protect your culture better, you don't know what the fuck that means, but it must be better than this. So then you go in that direction. That's it.
Oh, bubblegum more expensive, graph go down. No, actually, for people who don't have, well, comfortable media jobs, like I think most of us do, it's actually a big deal when things get more expensive. When the price they pay at the store goes up.
Yeah, so like I say in this clip, it was just such a caricature of an argument. First, apple pie, baseball, and Christmas have not gone away. I don't know what he's talking about. I eat apple pie every year, and most Americans still celebrate Christmas. Some traditions have changed and waned, and baseball's a lot.
What's the healthiest solution if people feel that way? I don't know. We have to do something to connect to each other again. I don't know if that just means going outside more or finding events or things that, I don't know, we have to feel that something is probably not good about the massive amount of tech that's like fucking flooding people's lives constantly.
A lot less popular than it used to be, and I'm sure there are many reasons for that. What it really has to do with free trade or why it's necessarily a bad thing, I'm not sure. There's still baseball leagues for anybody who wants their kid to play baseball. There's still baseball on TV for anybody who wants to watch it. It hasn't gone away. It's just become less popular, and I'm not sure why I should care. But again, the idea that has anything to do with free trade or that free trade has taken away apple pie or Christmas from America, it just comes off as delusional. And then he's dismissing increased costs for American families because of tariffs as bubblegum.
Real GDP gains only come from technological implementation. By offloading all manufacturing to China, you're giving up the ability to improve through advancements. How do you figure? First of all, history betrays you. That's absolutely not fucking true. Do you think America stopped innovating when we let other people refine metal for us? What are you talking about?
Just want cheap bubblegum. And no, it's about the price of clothes, the price of food, the price of housing. Like, these are the things that struggling Americans have struggled to afford in recent years. And protectionist trade policies, my argument is that they make those things more expensive. You can disagree with that argument if you want, but to just dismiss those concerns as you just want cheap bubblegum, it seems just completely dismissive and reductionist. He seemed to just blame everything under the sun on free trade, including the fact that kids don't play outside anymore.
Kids don't go outside anymore.
And because of free trade? No,
yes.
Because of technology.
Okay, no, but wait, it's
like,
oh,
seriously?
He said it. Who said it? Somebody said it. Technology. But technology is that's just not very sexy. Nobody cares. Also, these guys make all their money on their technology, right? And I make money on technology. I make money in a way having you guys be, I guess, miserable or at least addicted to technology, right? So talking against that is kind of talking against your own interest. But it's just not a very fun thing to talk about. Are Americans actually struggling with basic necessities? No, but like if you say that, everybody gets super ass pained about it. So, but not really, no.
I think kids don't go outside because they play Fortnite on the Xbox or they're addicted to their iPads or because they live in less neighborhoods. Like, there's so many reasons for that, but it's not because we have too much free trade with Canada. And then at one point, the notion that young Americans these days are ignorant came up and don't understand our history and our culture and civics. And I agree with that to some extent. He suggested that too was because of free trade.
The people who don't live here and aren't from here don't know or care.
Who don't live here or are not from here? Does he mean immigrants there, or is he just talking about people manufacturing from other countries for us? I haven't watched this whole thing. So.
And he suggested that too was because of free trade.
The people who don't live here and aren't from here don't know or care.
I think an increasingly large share of native-born people don't know history or value traditions.
Which is exactly my point. It is being diluted and dissolved.
It's being diluted and dissolved.
But not because of immigration, because of their own ignorance and lack of education.
And I think a large...
This is a neocon, Brad. Well, that's like a bad word. That's like the N-word. You don't call people neocons. That's supposed to be an insult. But like, Brad is like a traditional like conservative. I think he just has like conservative values. These people are like a dying breed. Like the real conservatives who don't just buy into all of the MAGA populist brain rot.
Which is exactly my point. It is being diluted and dissolved.
But not because of immigration, because of their own ignorance and lack of education.
And I think a large component is free trade, which is why I brought the issue up.
Like, no, Tim, I actually think that's probably to do with the education system and with parenting, not with import levels and tariff prices. I mean, he just seemed to blame literally every single thing that's bad in America today on free trade.
So he's like, I don't know if he'll get there, but remember, it's like, don't respond with substance to anything Brad says. Blame import, tariff good, tariff good. Blame import, tariff good. Blame import, tariff good. Blame import and tariff good. Did you just call a libertarian a neocon? Libertarian will probably align with neocons more on econ policy and less on foreign policy. And a libertarian might align maybe more with a populist on foreign policy, but not at all on econ policy. Because populists like MAGA, there's a concept called third positionism, but these guys will be socialists. They might not call it that, but people like MAGA would have no problem with socialism as long as it's benefiting their ethno-nationalist interests. That was a mouthful, but the best recent example of this is, remember how much we hated Obama and net neutrality and Obama controlling the internet and net neutrality, this is the worst thing ever. But when Trump says maybe America should own 50% of TikTok, that's okay because it's serving the ethno-nationalist interests of the MAGA movement. So, yeah.
Including housing prices, which simply doesn't make any sense.
Inherently, Tom Fuller just said, third position identifies fascist and socialist. Yes, there's nothing inherently contradictory between fascism and socialism per se. If socialism is looked at primarily as an economic organization, a mode of economic organization, and if fascism is just looked at structure of government in terms of authoritarian, totalitarian leadership. So you can have a leader who wants to control the media, control the government, single party, if you want to be real big and prosecute political enemies, but is also like really big on redistribution, on protectionist policies, on anti-free trade stuff, anti-immigration stuff that's protecting your domestic workers and domestic economy. There's nothing contradictory between those two positions, which is what a third positionist and a lot of MAGA are like basically making their way towards if they're not already there.
1950, it took approximately 4,637 hours of labor on average for the average American worker to own a home. As of 2024, it's 15,142. I don't think Gen Z is particularly buying the argument that they've been raised out of poverty, things have gotten better. I think Gen Z is actually livid over the conditions that they've been left by these policies.
This is such a one-dimensional stat. Like, to buy a house, like, first of all, are we talking averages or medians? Because that's important, because there's probably a lot more larger houses now that might pull up the average. But also, like, what is the house now compared to what it used to be? My understanding is, if somebody has a link, I would appreciate this, because I've read this a lot, but I haven't seen this distilled in graph or like data form. So I want to make sure I'm not repeating something correct. But my understanding is houses in America in general have gotten a lot larger than they used to be as well. So if you have to work more for a larger house, it's not as surprising. And it might also be too that today people maybe expect more to have a house, whereas before they were happier living in, like, I don't know if like a townhome or like whatever the fuck you call those things are considered homes or not, or for those be considered apartments. I'm not sure. But it's always be fearful or be waryful. Be weary of people that use like one-dimensional comparisons like that.
This whole framing is incorrect. Housing is not unaffordable today because of free trade. It's because governments across this country have made it impossible to build housing. That's why we have a housing shortage and housing is so expensive. And in fact, the kind of protectionist policies you're talking about would make housing more expensive. You put tariffs on the imports that go into building homes, you're only making it even more expensive.
I mean, like I say in that clip, if you put tariffs on Canadian lumber or imports of construction materials that we bring in currently from all around the world, housing will get more expensive, not less. Like, I just don't understand this point. But at least there we were trying to have a civil conversation, which, as we see, didn't last that long. But anyway, like I said on the show, I felt like we lived in different realities. At one point, the other guest suggested, and Tim Pool agreed, with the notion that young American women today have no other options in terms of career prospects or income other than OnlyFans, which is, in case you don't know, like a subscription website where people can sell pornography of themselves.
I'm pretty sure women are being more represented across like more, at least when I checked this like 5 years ago, across more disciplines like than they ever were in the past, but okay. What did I debate this guy? I debated him on C-SPAN a long time ago. I don't even remember what over, but
I'm not out here defending OnlyFans. I've always said I think people shouldn't do it. You usually won't make any money and you'll regret it. But that's like just not true. That people have no other options other than selling their bodies online because of our dystopian economy or something. Like, that's just not reality. It's completely untethered from reality, in fact. Here's that clip.
And then we get a new iPhone that has an action button on the side. That's worth gutting the entire Midwest culture of the United States, or giving my children no hope besides maybe OnlyFans if they're a girl, or becoming a podcaster. Tim, God forbid. God forbid our kids ever do that.
But this is just a non-reality. The idea that young women growing up today have no options other than OnlyFans. You need to touch grass.
No, No. There's over a million American girls on OnlyFans. That's crazy. There's over a million prostitutes.
That's not because they haven't.
No, I'm saying because
is that there are a million American girls on OnlyFans, or was it there are a million accounts on the site, which also includes like worldwide. Anybody else who has them, I think, right?
The best options right now. The culture we created technology and it's profitable, and we're basing off profit. On that regard, OnlyFans is a good option.
He's right.
OnlyFans is a good option.
Sorry, 1 second.
For the company.
Any young woman can go to college and become a nurse and instantly be employed. Can become a teacher and instantly be employed. It is massively in demand.
That's absolutely right.
That's absolutely incorrect. If you're a nurse, you're going to have a hard time finding a job in the United States of America right now.
woman can go to college and become a nurse and instantly be employed, can become a teacher and instantly be employed. That's completely wrong. This is massively in demand.
That's absolutely incorrect.
What about it is absolutely
You're
true.
not getting out of college and just getting a job. That's not true.
What does he think most people do out of college? Like just float through doing nothing for years and years and years? Like,
if you have a useful degree, you absolutely are.
Absolutely.
By the way, the 1 million figure, you've seen this probably online or in commentary.
It's just the number of accounts. And I think it's worldwide, isn't it?
The notion that 1 million American women are on OnlyFans, that's an estimate that's probably inaccurate. It's probably a pretty big overestimate for some technical reasons. They do it based on the share of revenue by country, and then they assume that equals out equal revenue per person when it's actually hugely unequal. So that's kind of a flawed estimate, but I'll link to a source explaining that discrepancy if you're curious about that. But regardless, to suggest that young American women today have no other options than OnlyFans and that's why they're choosing it is just like not true. As you heard, I talked about it in this clip, there's a huge shortage of nurses. So people who go to college, get qualified to be a nurse, they're not going to have trouble finding work. By and large, there could be some exceptions somewhere, but there's a huge shortage of nurses. And the unemployment rate for nurses as of 2022 was 1.6%. That's extremely low. The same thing is true with teaching, which I also mentioned. There's a huge shortage of teachers in America that are qualified and interested. So if you go to college and you get certified.
Remember, like, average unemployment, I think you want that number to be around 5%. So anything lower than that is considered suboptimal. Anything higher than that is considered suboptimal. 1.6%, whatever you said, that is an insanely low unemployment rate. Jesus Christ.
To be a teacher, by and large,
that's a buyer's market for employees.
You'll be able to find a job shortage. As one. I'm not saying our economy is perfect or there's just this fountain of amazing paying jobs or anything like that. Of course not. But I'm just saying it's like bizarre and insane to suggest that women have no options other than OnlyFans. I don't know what reality these people are living in. And I just gave you 2 examples with teaching and nursing, but it's true across the board. The unemployment rate for women with a college degree is 3%. It's under 3%. That means almost all women with college degrees who are seeking employment find it. Like there's some truth to the idea that young people face difficult prospects, but just the alarmist level and detachment from reality, I felt both of them had kind of fallen.
Can you explain why a low unemployment rate is bad? Because you want there to be some level of frictional employment where people are moving between jobs. It gives employers the ability to hire people. It gives businesses the ability to start up. If the unemployment rate is too low, then nobody will start businesses because there aren't employees there. The wages will become insanely inflated. The business might become untenable because you have to pay too much for labor and then you just either close shop or the things that you sell become so expensive that nobody buys it or just becomes more exclusive. 5% I think is about like where you want your unemployment to be. You want there to be some natural friction.
In 4 struck me as really, really quite something. But now let's get into the part of the podcast where things got nasty and kind of unhinged. We talked a lot about China, which we do insane amounts of trade with China, and we rely on them and their production systems for basically everything Americans consume, from clothing to materials to food and electronics and so many other things. But Tim basically wanted to cut off all trade with China, seemed to not care what any of the economic consequences of that would be, based on moral outrage over some anecdotal, horrific, and truly terrible things that happen in China, which is, of course, an oppressive and horrific country in terms of their government in many ways. Take a listen to this clip where he talks about a Foxconn facility in China in a story from 2010.
Should we suspend trade with any country that has something like this happen? 150 Chinese workers at Foxconn threatened to commit suicide by leap.
Oh my God. Like Tim gives a fuck about Chinese people. The moralizing. Give me a break, dude. I would have brought a fucking pacifier and a baby bottle just for this set. Give me a break.
From the factory in protest of their working conditions. Foxconn installs anti-jumping nets. Here's a photo of the anti-suicide nets. Is this okay for free trade? I mean, graph go up?
I remember this happening. Hang on, let me answer this question. So you just showed one terrible story from a country with billions of people and asked me if we should shut down trade with a whole country based on one anecdotal story from 2010 about one company in horrific conditions. By that logic,
sorry. I'm going to talk over you if you try to reframe the argument. I said, from this story, should we have shut down trade with China over, at this time, this specific incident occurring?
A whole country.
Yes.
Over one
company.
It's
a simple yes or no question.
No, we shouldn't.
Okay.
You can see there how he went on and on for minutes.
I like how he just says it too. No.
in the build up to this, but as soon as I started speaking, had to just interrupt me and shout over me for reframing it when I'm literally addressing his exact point. But anyway, my point is this little clip I just showed you, this exchange kind of reveals the demagoguery behind a lot of Tim's rhetoric.
Also, the net is an improvement. You don't want these people jumping and dying, right? I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
This conversation. He cited one horrific, emotionally compelling example from quite a long time ago, and then wanted to argue that because of that, we should shut down trade with an entire country of billions of people. And the point I tried to make before he shouted me down was that if we were going to do that, one horrific thing happening in a country means we can't trade with them. We couldn't trade with very many countries, and basically no one could trade with America. They just have to find one horrible.
Earlier, you mentioned that we don't need to protect base-level industries like lithium extraction or steel production. I think there is a strong national security argument for both those two. I would say shipbuilding is some of those too. Just curious if you'd agree with those statements. Oh, you put the just curious thing in. Fuck you. Never mind. Okay, I won't ban you. You're lucky. You can make arguments for tariffs, okay, beyond economic arguments. So when you look at like the CHIPS Act, or if you say like we should manufacture microprocessors in the United States or have some level of steel manufacturing, because if we get into a war with a foreign country, then maybe we want to be able to manufacture these things at home. Those are legitimate arguments for protecting some industries. But those aren't economic arguments. Those are national security arguments that are usually made at an economic expense. So you might say something like, hey, we are going to pay more for steel. That's just a cost that we have to bear because the national security purpose, it makes it worthwhile. Or we are going to pay more for processors or for graphics cards or for, Intel bullshit, whatever, because it's worth it to have the national security interest there shored up domestically. Those are legitimate arguments for tariffs, but they're going to cost more. That's a cost that you pay for that. That's fine.
Place where illegal immigrants are being abused in labor conditions or something in our country, and then, America, terrible, don't trade with them. Now, to be clear, China has some very problematic practices and terrible labor conditions and horrific human rights abuses, and it's not just one place, but that argument he was using was literally just one example.
And if you want to go further, trading with these countries gives you more control over those industries because, one, those people are working worse jobs than factory jobs, and two, you can actually force companies or force other countries to change the way that they treat their laborers through trade agreements. That's how you do it. But
actually really flawed as an example if you look at, again, any sort of statistics or data rather than just an emotional story from 15 years ago. Foxconn, the company he's talking about that produces electronics in China, had this big controversy in the 2010s over the suicide nets and terrible working conditions, and I'm not defending their working conditions. I'm sure they were very bad, and I think they did improve in part in response to this controversy, but the notion of these mass suicides doesn't exist. It's not real. If you just look at the data, you'll see that. In 2010, when the Foxconn suicides gained significant media attention, the company employed approximately 930,000 people. During that year, there were 14 confirmed suicides at Foxconn facilities. That translates to a suicide rate of 1.5 per 100,000 employees. Meanwhile, the overall suicide rate in China that year was somewhere between 14 to 30 per 100,000 people. So the Foxconn employees were killing themselves at much lower rates than Chinese people in general or Chinese people that work at other companies. It's not a representative example at all. It's just an emotionally charged, horrifying story to try to reach broad-based conclusions about billions of people based on one anecdote that tugs at the heartstrings. That's how woke people make arguments. And apparently, MAGA leaders like Tim Pool. And he talked a lot about forced labor and modern-day slavery in China and these terrible things and kept trying to suggest that I somehow support that, though I obviously don't. And I looked into it even more after our conversation, and what I found was that about 0.4% of China's population is living in modern slavery, happening with a relatively small percentage of their population and workforce. Now, you might disagree with my opinion there, but does that make me evil? Because for just saying that, I was screamed at and literally called evil by Tim Pool. Take a listen.
If but one person is living as a slave, I have a problem with that and don't see why graph go up, why we should make money.
One person living as a slave? Is he against like he might be actually, the prison worker slavery stuff in the US or?
In any way off of a foreign country that is doing something like this.
So one person living as a slave in a country of billions of people, what you just said, we should write off trade with the whole country.
It's really simple actually. When Donald Trump calls him on the phone and says, you will right now get that man freed and declare it. Otherwise we put a 30% tariff on all your goods. Guess what that country does? It frees that slave. You are saying you accept a certain degree of mass suicide so that your graph go up.
That is not what I'm saying.
So you think we should?
No, maybe we should sanction trade with Foxconn. Maybe we should restrict trade in that industry. Maybe that specific region of China. It's horrible. It's evil. China's evil. I don't know what you're trying to make me say about.
We should not do trade
with anything with China. Okay, you explain that to Americans when every single thing they rely on and buy gets more expensive after years of inflation under Biden.
I will.
You come in. MAGA comes in and says, "All right, you know what? You guys elected us because everything's so unaffordable. Fuck it.
I will stand on top of a mountain. I will stand on top of a mountain and say, and directly into the eyes. I will do it right now. To every voter, I will look into the eyes of every voter right now and say, bread is evil and accepts human sacrifice so that you can have a cheap iPhone.
Jesus
and if you're willing to buy a cheap iPhone, knowing that people are committing mass suicide, you stand along with them.
So I'm evil because I disagree with you about trade policy?
Because you think there's an acceptable degree of mass suicide and concentration camps so that your economy can improve.
I don't think that. You're shadowboxing with a caricature.
Well, that clip was quite something, and it was something to be there. And have somebody tell you you're evil because you disagree with them about what the most appropriate trade policy is. Like, wow, I honestly wasn't expecting that. It caught me off guard. And of course, I already went over how some of what he's saying is just not true. There was no mass suicide at Foxconn. The suicide rate for Foxconn employees was much, much lower lower than the overall Chinese population. But of course, it is true that horrific human rights abuses occur in China at the hands of the Chinese government.
Okay.